back to my homestead. Today I would like to show you how I'm going to do a very simple canning process of meat. And I'm going to be using raw pack style, meaning that it's going to be raw meat. I'm going to be putting it in cold jars and processing them in the pressure canner. Okay, so meat has to be processed in the pressure canner because it's a low acid food and it requires high temperatures and high pressures to be canned safely. I grew up back in the old Soviet Union and not many people had pressure canners, so most women learned how to do canning meat in the ovens. And I mean, we all lived, none of us died from botulism, but I know that it's not the safest way to do it. So this is why I'm going to show you my Russian recipe, however, using pressure canner for safety. So first things first, I have a pressure canner behind me and I'm going to fill it up with water, and always follow the directions of your canner. Depends on how much water you have to put in. For my canner, I need 2 inches of water on the bottom. Now, this is a golden rule that I follow. If the jar filled content will be hot, it has to go in a hot canner. But if I have cold meat or cold jar, it has to go in a cool canner. So my canner, I'm going to fill up with just room temperature water, nothing special, and I know it's going to be 2 inches of water. So today I'm going to be canning pork meat, and this is the pork from our dispatched pigs that we just harvested a couple of days ago, and it's random pieces. So that's the beauty of canned meat, that it's going to be nice and soft because the high temperature of pressure canner will make that. And I know that sometimes people are very cautious about using fat, but in this case I am okay leaving some fat on my meat. It's okay because this is pork. And so what I'm going to be making today, if you guys are interested in learning Russian words, we're going to be making Tushonka. Tushonka means canned pork, or it can be made Tushonka with any other meat, chicken, turkey, or beef. But in my case today, it's going to be pork. So, things that I'm going to need for today's canning. Well, obviously the meat. Then I'm going to be using some bay leaves. And there are smaller size bay leaves, so I'm going to be using 1 per jar. If they're very large, I can break them in half. Then I'm going to be using some black pepper. In Russian recipes, we usually use peppercorns, but I am switching it up to already crushed fresh black pepper. And then I'm going to be using salt. And you guys can use any salt you want. In my case, I have pink Himalayan salt. Please excuse my cat. She is having issues. Shmaki, what are you doing, honey? Stop crying. And then I'm going to have a little bit of water, and I will show you what I'm going to be doing with that water. So, okay, what else? So we have pint jars. These are regular mouth jars. I prefer wide mouth, but I couldn't find any. So I'm going to be using regular mouth. And they're already washed, but not sterilized. They're just clean washed. Why? Because for pressure canning, sterilization of jars is not necessary. And here are my lids and the rings. And the only thing that I like to do, I like to cover them with hot water. So I boiled this water a few minutes ago, and it's hot water. And the reason why I like to do it is because it's not going to boil my lids and rings, but it's going to get them soft. And I like to use them when they're a little bit softer that way. Okay, what else do we need? Well, we're going to need a funnel because it's going to be easier for me to pack the jars with a little funnel. I'm going to need a little debubbler, and since I don't have a real one, this is just a plastic knife because it's going to help me to get rid of any kind of bubbles if I have any bubbles. Also, I'm going to take a paper towel, just a regular clean paper towel, and I'm going to put just a little bit of vinegar on it, so when I need to wipe them at the end. So I'm just going to get that ready. Okay, so I'm going to start by putting bay leaf on the bottom, and it's going to provide a very nice flavor. So a small leaf is good, but if it's very large, I will break it in half. And I'm just going to drop it to the bottom of each jar. And these are my little pints, and I find that using a pint for canned meat is better for my family size because then it's just enough for one recipe.
Well, that one was very small, so I'll throw more. Okay, so bay leaf on the bottom. And then after that, I'm going to be cutting up meat into little chunks. And I'm going to be dropping that inside of each jar as well. I'm not wearing gloves because I'm cooking for my family, so it's okay. So how big of a pieces am I going to cut? So make sure that there's no bones in it, okay? And I'm going to be probably cutting them about 1 inch little cubes, okay? Something like that. And I'm just going to drop them inside. Okay, so if my friends who have grown up in the old Soviet bloc, you guys, or Soviet Union, you remember Tushonka. It's very popular. It was served often when we went camping or if we lost electricity. And in my area, that was quite often. So I remember Mama taking out a jar of Tushonka and cooking some buckwheat with that. And we would have dinner because meat was good to go. So canned meat is so I'm removing some silver skin because it's going to make the meat tough. So this little silver skin right here. I find that having fully cooked meat preserved on a shelf stable foods is a very good way to be self-prepared and having food on the go whenever you need it. Okay, I'm leaving fat on them. It's okay. Tushonka or canned pork is okay to have some fat on it. So as long as it's not all fat, obviously. So there's some lean pieces, okay, and there will be some not so lean pieces, and it will be mixed very well together. All right, so I'm going to fill up my jar. How much meat am I going to put in each jar? First of all, as I'm putting it, I'm going to slightly push it down, slightly. Not severely where it's severely packed in, but I'm going to push it down because as the meat cooks in its own juice, okay, it's going to shrink a little bit. And for safety reasons, I'm going to fill it up only to about 1 inch to the top, and that's it, okay? So I'm going to put a little bit more in here, a little bit more, and that's it. Growing up, my dad raised one pig every single year because that's how we fed our family. Growing up in the Soviet Union, there was no meat available at the store. I will never forget episodes such as walking home from school and I would see a long line sticking out of the grocery store, wrapped around the block, and you have no idea what they're selling, but you get in line anyway. You get in line and you stand in line, and you find out eventually what they're selling, and they're selling chicken. So you're standing in line to buy chicken, and the chicken would be a whole chicken with the neck, the legs are pretty much still on, everything. So I think that's perfect. So yeah, so you would buy, and there was rationed. You could only buy 1 chicken per person, and that's it. So for our family, it was a large family. My mom had to be resourceful how she's going to feed the family. So she would be resourceful to stretch that chicken for a whole week. So granted, we did not eat meat every day. It was a normal thing not to eat meat every day. Because meat was very expensive. You could buy meat at the market, farmer's market, and that meat was very expensive, and we only reserved that for very special occasions, someone's birthday or a holiday, but otherwise we could not afford buying meat at the farmer's market. So that is why a lot of Russian families raised their own meat. Meats that we raised were rabbits. It was very common to raise a rabbit. It's very economical, and you can even raise it living in the city. Pigs, goats, sheep, chickens, we raised all of that stuff. Okay, so I filled up all the jars now with about 1 inch of head space. And as I was filling them up, I was pushing them down a little bit, just gently. And now I have to put my spices. Now, spices and salt are totally optional.
don't have to put anything at all. You can just leave them blank, just like that. Cold meat, raw pack, and that's it. But I like to flavor them just a little bit now, because when you open the jar later on, the meat will be nicely seasoned and ready for use. Okay, as a matter of fact, if you really had to, you could even eat it cold or put it in a sandwiches. Okay, so let me show you what I'm gonna put into it. Okay, so for each jar I'm gonna be putting half a teaspoon of salt, just a half a teaspoon, because we don't want to over salt it. Okay, so just a half a teaspoon per jar, and that's it. And like I said, these are pint jars. If this was a quart jars, I would put a whole teaspoon, but in this case only a half a teaspoon. And black pepper. So like I said, Russians put peppercorns, but I'm just gonna put, it's a little bit of a pinch, really, it doesn't have to be much, of crushed black pepper. All right, just like this on top of each jar. So I would say probably 1/8 of a teaspoon or so. Now, this part is kind of just for aesthetics. It's not necessary. So this is what happens when I put this in a pressure canner and a pressure cans, and the meat cooks, it shrinks a little bit and it goes down a little bit. So there may be a little pieces of meat exposed at the top above its own liquid, above its own juice. And it's perfectly safe, it's delicious, it's fine, it's not gonna go bad, but it doesn't look pretty. So because of that, I'm gonna be just adding literally just a room temperature regular water, just a splash. I want to say probably like a tablespoon or so of water. That's it, not much at all. Okay, just a little bit into each jar, just like that. Okay, and now remember my little hefty knife that I have right here. That's my debubbler. I'm just gonna push it down to make sure that it all flows down. Any kind of air bubbles that were there will try to come up. Okay, because we don't need those air bubbles there. All right, just like that. It's not much liquid at all. I mean, literally a tablespoon, maybe a little bit more. Okay, I think I'm gonna add just a little bit more right here on this one. Okay, that's it. Now I have this paper towel with a little bit of vinegar on it, and I'm just gonna run the edges. And the reason why I want to run the edges, because if there was any salt on it or any fat or any meat, I don't want it to interfere with the good and safe seal. That's all I'm doing. I'm just running on the edges, just like this. Okay, nice and clean. And now I'm going to be putting my lids, okay, and my jars. And again, this is my method. I put them in a hot boiling water, not boiling to boil on a stove, but just sort of warm them up a little bit and soften them up, because I find that they seal better if they were hot to start with, even though the new manufacturing instructions do not call for boiling them. It used to be boiling process. All right, and now I'm just going to be putting the rings on, finger tight. How tight? Not crazy tight, just finger tight. Okay, that's all. And at this point, all my little jars will go into the canner. All right, so I had 7 pounds of meat. 7 pounds of meat. And guess how many jars I have? 7 jars. For some reason, I always get more jars ready than I have to. I have no idea why. It's just a bad habit I have, I guess. All right, so here are my 7 jars, and they will go into the canner now. One thing I forgot to mention, that when I poured the water into the canner, I'm also going to put a splash, about couple of 2-3 tablespoons of vinegar, because it helps to keep things clear and not cloud up my jars. All right, so remember, it's a room temperature water, and the meat is also cool. It's going to go into my canner just like this. Now, if my jars were hot, I would have to put them into a hot canner. Always make sure that you have that little shelf that goes on the bottom. All right, so that's it.
7 jars. Okay, so now it's time to put a lid on. Before I put a lid on, I'll always inspect the lid, make sure the gasket is not broken, and follow the directions of your pressure canner, how to close it, because you have to make sure that it closes properly. And now I'm gonna turn on the heat. I'm gonna turn it up to a medium high, okay? Because I don't want it to come to a boil very, very quickly, and make sure that all my valves are open, everything is open, and I'm gonna wait until it comes to a boil and it starts steaming from this valve here, and it has to steam for 10 solid minutes before I put any weight on it. So it's gonna take me a little while. So let's quickly review the times, the pressure processing times, okay? So the pressure canner is cold right now. It needs time to come to boil, steam for 10 full minutes, then I put the weight on. The weight has to be according to our location, your location, my location. My location is that I need 10 pounds of pressure. Other places that different elevation will require 15 pounds of pressure, okay? And after I put my weight on of 10 pounds of pressure, I have to watch the gauge to reach 10 pounds. When it reaches the 10-pound gauge, at that point, I can start the timer. Okay, I had pints. For pints, I need 75 minutes. That means an hour and 15 minutes for full processing, okay? From that point on till the end. But if I had quarts, the quarts require 90 minutes. That means it's an hour and a half, okay? So, but right now I'm just gonna wait until it comes to a boil and start steaming. Okay, it has come to a boil and now it's beginning to steam. I don't know if you guys can see it. Can you see that steam coming through right over there? You see that steam coming through? It's a steady steam, and I need to put my timer on for 10 minutes because it needs to steam for 10 full minutes before I put the weight on. Okay, the pressure canner has been steaming now for exactly 10 minutes. And now I'm gonna put 10 pounds of pressure. And according to my pressure canner, I have to put to number 2. And that will be 10 pounds. And I'm going to be waiting for this gauge to go up to number 2 as well, because that will indicate that it has risen to 10 pounds of pressure. And only at that point, I'm going to put my timer on for 75 minutes. Okay, it has reached exactly number 2 right there on my gauge. Can you guys see that? That means, according to my pressure canner, that is 10 pounds. Okay, and I hear gentle little hissing sound going on, and I'm gonna set my timer for 75 minutes, which is an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, the timer just went off, and I am going to turn off the heat, but it's very important that right now I'm not gonna do anything to my canner. Now, if I could move it to a different spot, I would. But I'm just gonna leave it right here on my stove, and I'm gonna wait until the pressure falls all the way down to a 0, okay? I'm not gonna open it, I'm not going to remove the weight, none of that. I have to wait. And this usually takes about half an hour, maybe even 45 minutes, sometimes even longer. But it has to take time to cool off before I open the cover. And here they are out of the canner, sitting here on my counter. Look how pretty they are. So they are still boiling. Can you see those bubbles? Yeah, it's gonna take them a while to completely cool off, but they sat in the canner for about an hour. I removed the lid and here they are. Okay friends, so my pork meat is done. It's sitting right over there and it's cooling off, and I'm gonna keep them on my counter for about 24 hours or so, and then tomorrow I will take the rings off. I'll wipe them down, make sure that the jars are nice and clean, and I'll put them on my pantry shelf, and they're gonna be shelf-stable meat, canned meat in my pantry. So just think about it. No MSG, no nitrates, no preservatives, natural preservation method. That's the best method. And I know a lot of people are scared of pressure canners, but they're nothing to be scared about. That's one of them right there. And it's not difficult to use, just read the booklet and go ahead. So I hope this was helpful to you guys. If you like my videos, please subscribe and leave a comment, share how you preserve your meat. On this note, stay encouraged and try something new.